meeting. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Richie, do we have to go through our online?
We do. We do at least through August. So,
Okay.
so I'll read the preamble. In accordance with the county's continuity of government ordinance and Virginia Code Section 15.2-1413, this meeting is being held electronically over the Zoom platform. The authority directors are not physically present at a single central location. Rather, they are participating electronically. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. The public is invited to comment during the meeting's public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone interested in commenting should use the raise hand feature on Zoom. If you're listening by telephone, please use the *9 feature to notify the facilitator. All speakers must identify themselves and the magisterial district where they live or have a business. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. And with that, we will call roll and ask each director to identify his or her general location. So we'll start with Jay Fennell.
Present, Jay Fennell, my residence in the Whitehall Magisterial District.
Let's see, Peter Taylor.
Present at my home in Keswick, Virginia.
Sherry Buttrick. Sherry, make it.
She's muted.
Sherry, your microphone. Here we go.
I'm trying to get it unmuted. I'm here in the forestry department.
Hamilton Moses.
In North Garden.
Let's see, David Emmett. Did he make it?
I think he's here yet.
All right, John Moore.
At my home in Samuel Miller District.
Rose Emery.
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
And Sharon Merrick.
I'm in Ravenna District.
All right, Mr. Chair, we have a quorum and we can proceed.
Are there any matters we need to address not listed on the agenda? All right, if not, we'll move to the minutes, assuming everybody's had a chance to read them. And if we have any comments, discussion, motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yeah, so Rich, you can do a roll
No,
call.
I think we can do a voice vote on this. I mean, we just asked for those in favor and then if anyone's opposed.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes approved. Our only item on the agenda tonight, Chester Music Hall. Scott, turn it over to you.
Evening, thank you. You all will remember this is an item that was previously before you at the March meeting. Just to refresh your memory, this is the 76-acre property under an ACE program, purchase of development rights easement. And the deed of easement permits one main dwelling up to 7,000 square feet, unless prior written approval is obtained from each grantee, meaning this body and the Board of Supervisors as co-holders. It also permits 2 accessory dwellings. I had previously reported that there were 2 existing dwellings on this property. One of those has been removed, larger of the 2. The previous request that you all heard was for a new dwelling of approximately 12,800 square feet of above ground livable space. The dark blue outline here shows you the property. It's on Stony Point Pass Road, which is along this boundary here. And the approximate location of the structure is here where my pointer is showing. These are the location and rough architectural drawings that were provided for the authority's information the last time in March. Again, showing the building location, the building, And just to be clear, this portion is the actual structure. The other lines here are indicating a driveway and parking area and a separate garage structure. So it's mainly this structure here that we're talking about.
So could I ask, is the 12,800 square feet does not include the garage or does?
Right, it does not.
Does not, okay.
And that's typically, we typically apply the structure size limits to the dwellings and not to separate accessory structures, although some deeds also have limits for those separate accessory structures.
So should the square footage of that is it considered one of the, would it technically be considered one of the two accessory buildings? And if so,
no, those are accessory dwellings.
Dwellings, okay.
Okay, so the number of other kinds of accessory structures is not specifically limited by the deed, and typically they aren't.
Yeah.
And also, this is an older deed where we had reference to a primary dwelling and accessory dwellings. We don't do it that way anymore. We tend to just say X number of dwellings and give a size for each, rather than just relying on relative sizes that aren't specified.
Okay.
This was an elevation that was provided last time. This is an oblique aerial view from the north. Again, so you're looking at the opposite direction. Here's Stony Point Pass Road, and you can see where the existing driveway into the property is, some of the existing structures, and then the green star here is roughly where that new dwelling would be as proposed. All right, staff comment provided at the March meeting. The deed does not identify any specific avoidance areas on the property. The proposed location didn't impact critical slopes, stream buffers, floodplains, or mountain protection areas. However, the entire property is located in the Southwest Mountains Rural Historic District, and the proposed building location is at the highest elevation of the property, about 580 feet. So at the March meeting, the authority heard that request and put very briefly, the authority's concerns were impacts on the site and visual impacts of the dwelling's size and location on the site and on the surrounding area. The revised request before you tonight is for that main dwelling to be 11,500 square feet of above ground livable space. And again, that's not footprint, that's total space. So spread across 2 floors, most likely, as well as establishing a limit of 4,500 square feet on each of the 2 permitted accessory dwellings, which again did not have a specific size limit in the original version of the deed. And I should also mention that the owner, Mr. Manning, and his attorney, Mr. Blaine, are both here to answer questions and participate in the discussion. We have 3 potential motions for you to consider for approving the proposal with amendments, or denying the proposal. Hopefully those will be helpful. And Richie and I can both take questions. Again, Mr. Manning and Mr. Blaine are here to also participate. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Discussion, any questions? Thank you, Scott. Scott, is there any indication of where the accessory dwellings would be located?
Not in the proposal so far. If I have this correct, this is one of the 2 here, I believe, and the new one would be roughly here. Of course, Mr. Manning could say if he has any more specific plans.
All right.
At this time, no. We haven't drawn up or ideated on any kind of tertiary or secondary dwellings other than the cottage that exists there currently. We don't have any idea for another dwelling after that.
Okay. So you see building the main house at 11.5, and then you know that you're going to have one more at 4,500, and then but you don't have plans for a third one.
No, sorry. We have the intention to build the 11.5 main house, and then the house that is currently there, that I think is about 1,500 square feet, would remain for the foreseeable future, and we have no intention of building anything else as of today.
Okay. I don't know if I speak for the board, but would you all be open to possibly removing that second, that other dwelling that you don't have any intentions of at the time building? It's typically when we amend easements, we don't broaden them, we make them more restrictive. And this might be a helpful step.
And I'm happy to hear that we're, very in line with the idea of making this a more restrictive easement. I know when we spoke last time, that was kind of the intention of everyone. And we thought one of those big restrictive measures was actually taking those two unlimited sized ancillary dwellings and capping them at 4,500, which we thought was kind of a large step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Questions?
I would comment on a couple of things. Richie and I discussed just in terms of process. I'm a bit uncomfortable with amending this easement rather than approving or not approving a request for an additional square footage. I'm actually, ironically, I'm quite uncomfortable with the proffered limit of 4,500 square feet on each of the two permitted accessory dwellings. At the moment, accessory dwellings, I think, in concept, has a much smaller sense and concept. I mean, I think the existing one is what, about 1,000 square feet or something? The old music hall house was 3,000 square feet as a primary dwelling. We have used 4,500 square feet of above ground livable space on many older easements. And so there's a huge body of precedent for 4,500 square feet being the general size of a primary dwelling. So to my mind, it sets a very dangerous precedent to use as a proffer to improve the easement, a definition of 4,500 square feet as an accessory dwelling. And I have as much or more problem with that than I do with the size of the main dwelling, although that bothers me in addition because of the scale of this property. If it were 300 or 400 acres, I would probably feel differently.
Thanks, Sherry.
Could I ask if you can see this, you will be able to see this structure from, say, Castalia? Or from the, how visible is it going to be if it's at 580 feet?
So from Louisa Road at its closest point is about 3,000 feet from the road. And then from the edge of Castalia, where you're at the highest point on Louisa Road for that stretch, we're, call it about a mile from there. And that's really the only place at which it would be visible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
It would be visible from Stony Point, the road 600.
Probably.
Well, would it be? Yes and no.
From Stony Point Pass, yes, it would be visible for the stretch on the boundary of the property.
Okay.
Right. Thanks.
Just as a tree guy, though, it would be partially visible because if you look at the topo carefully, there's a big grove of ancient white oaks on the ridge line there that would block it from a big portion of Route 600.
All right. So where are we headed? Dr. Moses, I know that you didn't think you could be here, but Fortunately, you made it. Would you like to chime in? Not.
Is he muted?
Not sure.
Yes.
Are you able to hear me?
Now we can, Chip.
Now
Yeah,
we
now.
can.
I made a number of comments in written form by email yesterday, and I would like those incorporated with the minutes of this meeting as Richie, our counsel, has suggested. Excuse me, my voice is not cooperating. It would be, in my view, a great mistake for us to agree to these modifications of an easement, either by amending the easement or by recording in another way. The rationale is set out in my email, and I have little to add to it, except that were this easement to come before us today, we would not accept it. And therefore, to accept a modification of one already approved compounds the error. This is a relatively small property. 3 dwellings totaling almost 21,000 square feet would not come even close to any precedent we have set previously. This isn't the time to accept one now. What I had hoped we would see would be an agreement to either not have any accessory dwellings or not exceed the size of the current one or the one that it would be replacing. But instead, we are now being asked to approve a series of changes that simply are not in keeping with serving any public purpose. It would make a mockery of the notion that this property would be held and its development rights purchased using public money. Therefore, this would be a terrible precedent to set.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. All right, so if
Mr. Chairman, I did have some comments.
please.
I went back and read the original easement from 2007 and the recitations of the 2 existing structures that were there that Scott showed us. The original music hall was almost 3,100 square feet and the cottage about 1,300 square feet. And I read the words over and over that the improvements could be the 2 that are existing there, and then the addition of the single family up to 7,000 square feet. And I played around with the math a little bit, kind of like Dr. Moses did. If you had the 7,000 and the 2 accessory dwellings, you'd be at about 11,000 square feet total and finished. And I thought it was interesting that to go from 7,000 to 11,500 on the what we'll call main house or primary dwelling is another 4,500 square feet. And then although it was silent in the original easement of it being just 2 accessory dwellings, to add 4,500 feet to both of those does kind of start to feel like this thing's a little on steroids. And I think, and I really focused on that accessory dwelling, that it complements, that it's clearly subordinate, that it's kind of in your mind an overflow for guest or guest house, or you are trying to accessorize your main living space. So the way I get through all of this, I'm okay with the 11.5 as the request to increase the primary home. But I do think accessory dwellings should be accessory dwellings, and that's not 4,500 square feet. And just for kicks, I just kind of Googled what's the average size of a home, single family residence in Virginia. And I found a chart from 2020, and it was roughly, it wasn't even quite 2,000 square feet. So that's kind of where I am. I think 2 accessory dwellings need to be smaller.
Thank you. It seems like we have a consistent theme emerging here, revolving around the accessory dwellings. And
I have a problem with the size of the dwelling as well, with the 11.5 as well. House. Okay. Yes, and I tend to agree. Well. I tend to agree with Dr. Moses, because if the original was 7, I just have a problem with what's to stop everybody coming back and saying, oh, well, we really now want a 10,000 square foot house, not a 6 or not a 7. I just think it's a bad precedent to get into.
Well, and of course, I remember the music hall house, and it was in the 3,000 range. And what we were trying to do, I believe, at that time, was to give a lot of play for considering the neighborhood and considering, you know, the character of the sort of estate parcels and estate residences in the area. Give it that much play, which is seemed to me quite a bit of play. So, right, if the request were for a really incremental increase, you know, 7,500, something like that, you know, I think, yeah, okay, we can maybe live with that. But I agree, I'm having a little problem with the scale of the main house, considering that this was a purchased easement. And I have a big problem with the accessories in the same way that Sharon does.
Thanks.
John, do you have your hand up?
Yes.
Say again, please.
So I have a question about Sharon, about your math, and I'm just wondering whether since you just read the easement, and I have not read it that recently, so does the wording of the easement refer to a 7,000 foot dwelling in addition to the main house, or was the intention there really that the 7,000 square foot be a modification and replace the main house? In other words, if that's the case, then you don't get to a total of 11,500 square feet total permitted space on the property, because the intention was that the 3,000 square foot house becomes a 7,000 square foot house. And
no, I don't think that's
Scott.
That's not the way it reads.
I have it. I can share my screen. If I share my screen, I have the language up.
Please do.
That'd be helpful.
So that should be up.
Yeah.
If I click the right. So in terms of Director Moore's question, it's not that detailed.
Okay.
But you can see under 2.1, it just specifies one single family dwelling not to exceed 7,000, but it doesn't dictate where that would be. And then it can have 2 accessory dwellings without any limitation imposed. And then of course you've got the farm buildings also.
But
so
I think you read the main paragraph that refers to the 2 structures that are currently there.
Well, I don't see the reference unless it's in the preambles.
No. Right above there. Keep scrolling up where it says there shall be no construction, placement, or maintenance unless the structure or improvement are either on the property as of the date of the easement or as follows. So I read that to say, here are the two structures that are there as of the day of the easement, and others that are authorized are 1, 2, and 3.
It's not the way we've typically interpreted these. If they're,
I'm not sure that's right.
you know, usually if there's a number like this deed permits 3 dwellings. If there are 2 or 3 dwellings already there, that's fine. But we wouldn't read that to mean that there could be 5.
So the what I really dislike about the easement business nowadays versus the easement business of yesteryear is that, you know, a lot of this boils down to taste and what people think are appropriate. And I think that's really hard to agree on and codify and enforce. And so when I look at this, I say this is a little bit of an ambiguous easement, number one. Number two, there is no limit on the size of the accessory dwellings in the easement. And so there's interpretation, and I think ultimately it comes down to, you know, what's consistent with the neighborhood, one, and a negotiation with the landowner, number two. And given the fact that there is no limit on the accessory dwelling size, that really gives someone the free rein to do what they want. So I live in Keswick. I've lived in Keswick a long time. The larger houses are consistent with the neighborhood. The size of the house does not give me heartburn. And again, I think this boils down to negotiation. And so, you know, I wonder if we might contemplate an idea where we would allow one accessory dwelling at 4,500 square feet, and then the third dwelling would be no larger than what is in existence today, if that's not sort of a middle ground that we all can agree on. And that may or may not be something the landowner is interested in pursuing, but I would offer that up as a middle ground to get to a solution here.
So Peter, would there be a provision for an 11.5 primary residence or not?
Yes.
Okay. So that's with that, your accessory. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
So again, what I would offer up,
yes.
I believe that Peter has some additional comments.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify my position. Again, what I would propose is that we allow a main residence of 11.5, one accessory dwelling at 4,500, and then the third to not to exceed the size of the current cottage, which may or may not be acceptable to the landowner. I'm not sure about that, but that strikes me as a middle ground.
Thanks, Mr. Manning. You get a sense of what we're struggling with here, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
I do, and I'm trying to parse through exactly the will of the committee. You know, it seems like there's a sentiment of the ancillary dwelling sizes being larger than what people would be typically or traditionally comfortable with, and I understand that sentiment wholly. You know, what we really tried to do is as we read the easement, that there was this opportunity for these 2 unlimited sized dwellings, which is not in line with what's good stewardship on the road, and so we looked towards the non-dwelling outbuildings listed in the contract already that had that 4,500 square feet mark, which seemed acceptable to other individuals. And so we just decided that was probably the place to draw it as well, because it was already an accepted number and it was an accepted space, which would have the same view shed, the same materials, the same everything going into it. And so that's where that number originated from. And so I'm just trying to understand the will of the committee to trying to find some resolution here.
Yeah, we typically, at least in my mind, the 4,500 square feet is a barn, not a resident.
Yeah.
Although we have used 4,500 square feet as the major principal single-family dwelling in a lot of easements in the past, and we've used 2,000 square feet for secondary or accessory dwellings. So to me, it sounds more like what we're doing is enlarging all three houses than simply doing a negotiation to, placate the idea of the larger square footage for the main house. My concern is if I were many of the other easement holders, I would feel as if the accessory dwelling had now been defined at 4,500 square feet. And that to me makes me very uncomfortable. I understand that what you all were trying to do, Mr. Manning, and I appreciate your effort and your sentiment, and you probably just couldn't know that this was in the back of, a lot of the history with these. So forgive me for having an adverse reaction to it, because I think that your motivation was well-intended.
I don't find it adverse at all. I appreciate the knowledge, and frankly, we looked into the county records, and we kind of looked through the judiciary body of work to try and find some guidance here, and we came up a little lacking, that there really wasn't a firm definition of A, what an ancillary dwelling was, and B, what scale an ancillary dwelling could be. I mean, if it has a stove inside of it, it can be an ancillary dwelling, but if it has a stove and no bathroom, all of a sudden it becomes gray. Right. And so if the committee could give some enlightenment, I would genuinely appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Dr. Moses.
As was pointed out earlier, when this easement originated in 2007, there was a rationale for its provisions. 7,000 square feet for a main dwelling was pushing what was acceptable then and is pushing what is acceptable today for a property under easement. For a property that is not under easement, the owner can do anything the owner wishes to do that will be permitted by zoning. But the burden for us is higher than that, particularly for a property that was purchased under the ACE program for which public money was used. We are under no obligation to accept any deviation from the original terms. And the original terms do include the term accessory dwelling, but by common use then and still, although the term is not defined, you know it when you see it, much like the Supreme Court's definition of pornography. A 4,500 square foot accessory dwelling is not accessory. It is the size of the primary dwelling that we now use in our template for new easements that we would accept. It's twice the size of the average construction of a new dwelling in the Commonwealth. Therefore, I would like to propose, if you'll entertain a motion, that this be denied and that we ask the owner to come much closer to the terms of the original easement for both the primary structure and the accessory structures. That's a motion.
Thank you, Dr.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
In terms of discussion,
Yep,
I
continue.
Hello? Yes? No?
Yes.
I would not be completely averse to some incremental increase in the size. I think Peter's probably right that, estate parcel houses have crept up, although I'm not so sure at all that they're not beginning now to creep down. So I could entertain, a small incremental increase if that were really needed. I do worry about the visibility from 231. For those of you who know that house that is off of Route 20, that can be seen very clearly from the Garth Road as you're coming down by Ingleside. A mile is not very far. That's probably, 8 miles at least? And it makes a definite statement on the landscape. So I do worry a little bit and don't feel like we've got a lot of good information about the visibility from the, it's a scenic road, it's a rural historic district, it's got a lot of bells and whistles, it's an entrance corridor. It really does matter if there is the kind of, item on the landscape such as that one that's across the way. But I really would prefer to do this by an approval of square footage for larger if that is the will of people at some point, though the larger that has been requested here to me feels too large. I do worry about amending the easement. I would be very uncomfortable with any size limitation for the accessory dwellings that was in excess of 1,500 or 2,000 square feet, because that's been a kind of those are the numbers that we've used in the past. And I really don't want to set a precedent here for secondary dwellings, accessory dwellings, being able to cite this precedent to be 3,000, 4,500 square feet. I think that would actually do more damage than the size of the main house.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just reply to that, because I think those are very useful observations. I think that the committee has an able counsel, and I think addressing that in a drafting. I don't think you have to define for the entire county what an accessory dwelling is. You have an opportunity to clarify this easement that I think is quite vague. I know the group of us might have an idea of what an accessory dwelling is today, but as we saw in California, there was a court that determined that bees were fish. So I think, there is an opportunity to improve this easement. I don't know where. I'll leave it to my client to take this discussion and formulate a response as to what he wants to do in terms of a further compromise. But I think we have to keep in mind that the exercise is, does this request affect the overall conservation objectives of the easement? And as Scott put in his report, it doesn't impact the critical slopes or the streams or the forest resources. So, we think it's something that can be accommodated. The deed itself contemplated that it could be accommodated because it didn't say a hard line, it can't exceed. It said unless this body or the county itself approves it. So it did contemplate that there could be circumstances under which the 7,000 even would be increased. So, but I think this has been very helpful. We're very respectful of the views, and I just wanted to reply to that, I think, very valid legal observation that I think we can overcome.
Mr. Blaine.
Dr. Moses.
Mr. Blaine, the easement authority is a freestanding authority. Therefore, this must be approved by the county and this authority.
Yeah, we're with it. We're aware of that. Yeah, absolutely. I understand that.
I've made a motion.
Right. Could you, Scott, have you written down the motion? Could you reread, if you have, could you reread it?
What I wrote down was the motion was to deny the current request and ask the owner to return with a reduced request that is closer to the existing dwelling size standards.
Dr. Moses proposed it. Semery seconded it. Is there further discussion on this?
Again, reasonable people can disagree, and I have problems with this notion that larger houses are bad. Most of the historic houses in the neighborhood are larger than 7,000 square feet, and this idea that
13,000 square feet,
that you can't, that there's something malevolent in a house that's larger than that is beyond me. And again, I I worry deeply that when we're arguing over what, or we're debating over what everybody's taste is, that it's an untenable outcome. And so I'll just, put a stake in the ground. I don't feel that a 7,000 square foot cap is a do or die issue, frankly. And I've never felt that way. And this has come up in multiple conservation organizations I've been part of. So obviously, we need to all agree to get something passed here. But again, I would say that this notion that 7,000 square feet is a cap is not consistent with my views.
Thank you. I feel like that lacking a kind of a mathematical formula, taking in the acreage of the property, size of the primary dwelling, and the relationship of the size of the primary dwellings, this is where we've ended up. And I agree with Sherry on process. I think amending it would be an issue or would complicate things versus as it's stated in the deed of just, asking permission for an increase in the square footage of the main dwelling. But maybe accompanying that is also clarifying uniquely to this deed the maximum size of the accessory dwellings too.
Chair, I would just comment that if there's going to be a change to subsection 2 to accessory dwellings and limit it to 4,500 square feet or a number, even if it's 2,000 square feet, there's no way to enforce that 75 years down the road unless it's a matter of record.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Well, that's exactly right. I was thinking, Richie, that one would give up that and stay silent if we simply did it by approval. So yes, you're right, exactly, that it is a little bit of a horse trade if you want to memorialize that. I'm not sure I do.
Okay. Should we put Dr. Moses's motion to a vote? Is there further discussion?
I just want to be clear that in Dr. Moses's motion that we are also including having the issue with the secondary dwelling sizes, that it isn't just the 11,500 square feet. I wasn't quite sure the way the motion dealt with that.
I think it's handled. It seems like the motion was general enough, but the conversation intent of kind of what we've gone over today conveys where we are.
So I interpret the motion to
just say the proposal, the current proposal as before us is something that we would not approve.
But the option for Mr. Manning to come back to this body and to ask for permission remains open. That's the way I interpret the motion to be.
Sure.
As do I.
Mr. Chairman, can I just throw out a couple of numbers for part of the discussion?
Please.
When we look at the recitation in the easement from 2007, and it does speak to the 2 dwellings that were there, and then it says a single family house of up to 7,000 unless changed with written request. And then it mentions 2 accessory dwellings. In my mind, they came up with 2 accessory dwellings because there were 2 structures there, but maybe that's my interpretation. But here's just some math, just to kind of put some numbers on it. So if it allowed for a 7,000 single family home that we're referring to as the primary residence, and the 3,000, close to 3,100 square foot building is gone. So if we took that 31 and added it to the 7, that gives a little over 10,000 square feet. And you don't need another accessory building because you increased your primary building. And then the cottage that's there of 1,300 remains. And so in my mind, I took a secondary or accessory dwelling square footage and added it to the primary. So you don't need another accessory dwelling because you enlarged your primary. That's just my math.
Understood. I've combined them.
I would suggest that the 3,100 feet was included within the 7,000 feet.
That was my point earlier.
That was the point, the intent.
Okay. All right.
I do just want to caution. So, you know, basically, in this case, we're saying no, thank you. But you know, come back with another plan, which we may or may not approve. In the real world, you know, that's a process, and it's an expensive process. And I also think we have to think about, okay, you know, if there is this labyrinth of uncertainty on what our view is in terms of what we will accept, I wonder how many people are going to really want to put their land in easement going forward. I think it's a real issue. And so to the extent that we can provide guidance, at least at a very high level on, you know, where our head is at, as opposed to just, no, thank you, come back with another plan, I think that would be helpful. And I think it would be good for the long-term easement process and people's willingness to take advantage of it.
Thank you. And I agree, except that if this were I think as Dr. Moses had said earlier, if this were a brand new proposal, you know, we wouldn't accept it. And, you know, what we're comfortable with is what we accepted when it was written. And so this is new water and territory for us. And we just need to be careful not to make any missteps.
I disagree with the thesis that we would not accept this if this were a new easement under the terms proposed. I think we would, particularly in an area as protected as Keswick.
Okay.
Well, it wouldn't meet our number of dwellings for the overall acreage, I don't think, Scott, for starters.
Right.
Well, the density that was there typically is more than we would take. But remember, this is an ACE easement from many years ago, not a donated easement under current guidelines. So
yeah, and also the accessory dwellings, you know, being 1,300 square feet in scale, to me, that's appropriate for a sort of a less than a full-blown house, but 4,500 square feet is 3 full-blown houses to me. I would say, to answer Peter's question and give some overall thoughts on the subject, maybe not entirely related to this project. I understand exactly where Peter's coming from, and there are a number of wonderful houses in the area that, you know, definitely exceed the 7,000 square feet and are, you know, lovely additions to the landscapes. Castle Hill being one of them, and Mount Sharon perhaps being another. But I would say it's a matter of scale in terms of the size of the main house with respect to the acreage of the overall farm. It also should be that the conservation resources have some bearing upon it, and the scenic and historic impact of this does concern me a bit without some significant more research and, you know, ground truthing about it. So I would say, Peter, it's not every 7,000 square foot house on an easement that we couldn't exceed, but on a parcel of this size, on a parcel where it's the highest spot and it's you know, close to the scenic road and in the historic district, those to me are both factors. And the ancillary dwellings, accessory dwellings, I would say the 1,300 square foot dwelling that's there now rather gives guidance as to the scale of that sort of thing.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? All right, Richie, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
I will do it. Let's see.
Just
Director,
for clarity, could Scott repeat the key elements of the motion that I made?
Scott, please.
Sure. What I have again is Dr. Moses moved and Ms. Emery seconded to deny the current proposal and ask the owner to reduce the request to levels closer to the existing standards for dwelling sizes.
Thank you, Scott.
okay, we're ready for a vote.
Looks like we are.
Director Fennell,
Aye.
Director Taylor,
Nay.
Director Buttrick, Director Moses.
Aye.
Did Director Emmett, has he joined us or he's still absent?
Let's see him.
Director Moore,
Aye.
Director Emery,
Aye.
and Director Merritt.
Nay.
So the motion to deny passes by a vote of 5-2.
Thank you. Mr. Blaine, Mr. Manning, I hope you're understanding where we're coming from. I have a sense of this process, and I'm hoping at some point we can find something that works.
Absolutely. I want to thank the committee for all of the time and diligence you all put into this easement and this effort, as well as all other easements and efforts. You know, this is a historic part of the world that needs to be cherished and preserved. And I appreciate all of the effort that you go through each and every day to do this. I know these are volunteer positions, and so you're dedicating your time because this is a passion, and I appreciate your efforts. On a request similar to what was discussed prior, for my own education, you know, I know the motion was about coming closer to the number that is necessary, you know, closer to the easement. Closer can mean very different things to people. 7,100 square feet could be closer, and 8,000 square could be an 8,000. So you know, closer can be a very relative term. I understand, as you said, we're in unexplored territory currently. I'm happy to be a pioneer, but we just want to I just want to make sure that if we do come back, that we are doing so with something that will be palatable for all, and that we're not just shooting in the dark and spending another, you know, hour of all of your time to have another conversation that is a non-starter from the beginning.
No, it's an absolutely reasonable request for some clarity that we need the further discuss.
Just to take a note from another body, I mean, we might approach a future session not as an up-down vote on a single proposal, but more like a work session that the Planning Commission might hold and lay out a few scenarios and discuss them in comparison.
I think that's a great idea, Scott. Board members, are you amenable to that?
Yes.
With respect to this easement or generally?
This easement.
I would take exception to that. I do not believe it is desirable for us to engage in a negotiation during a session of the authority with any individual who is before us. We know in the past that doing that kind of negotiation and horse trading in this session, particularly by Zoom, is not particularly effective.
Correct. Duly noted. All right.
Mr. Manning, may I make one comment to yours? If you would come to us with a proposal, please. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can now, sorry.
If you would come to us with a proposal for a large main house and no accessory structures that did not exceed the total square footage of the original easement, you would have had immediate approval. The difficulty here is that we have never, nor am I aware of other easement holders comparable to us, accepting easements that would allow this number of improved square feet on a property of this size. That's the fundamental problem. So if you want a big house, then get rid of the accessory structures or keep them down to 500 or 1,000 square feet. There are plenty of houses that are large that have small accessory dwellings that are used as guest houses that are 800 or 1,000 square feet. So if you come back to us with a proposal that does not exceed the 3092 plus 1339 plus 7,000, then you're in the ballpark from at least this chair's perspective.
That's a wonderful piece of clarity. Thank you very much, and we'll make sure that as we
I think the math is wrong again.
Right, and I want to make sure that we're in I do want you to walk away with a comfortable a set of numbers that we're all comfortable with. And if we could bounce that around for a second, I think it would be helpful. It would save everybody a lot of time.
If I may,
just to...
John, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, my point earlier was, and I didn't make it very well, and everybody else has been pretty articulate and voiced many of the thoughts that I would have made, and there's no use in me duplicating those. But I don't believe that the intent of that original easement is that the original house, 3,300 square feet, and the 7,000 square feet, that the intention was that that was additive. I don't believe that's the case. But that's just me.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I have a pretty firm sense. I think I was chairing the ACE committee at that time. And that is not the way the easements were drafted or interpreted. So that, yes, I think the initial impression we came in with, which was you had the music hall house of 3,100 and something. If somebody wanted to increase that to 7,000, the easement would permit that. And the accessories, 1,300 gives you a sense of scale as to what that sort of house might be. I mean, Chip, we can't reduce the size below the one that already exists. Then you're going to have an instant violation.
And I also
want to make sure, first of all, the easement is interpreted as I believe that it was intended.
Can we pull it up? Because I don't think that's not my reading of it. Let's just be clear on what the easement says.
What's existing on the property currently? Is it just the 3,100? Is it just a 1,300 square foot cottage and not the music hall?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And I additionally don't believe that the 4,500 square feet was intended to be a size related to a residential structure, even though the wording is vague. Because the wording is vague, and because the easement holder or landowner of record has to come to us for an interpretation and then an approval of something, it's fair for us to make that assessment. And I get, Peter, where you're coming from on the size thing and it being a matter of taste and all of that, but I don't think that's where the argument lies. I think we're trying to figure out what the intent of the original easement is. And fortunately, we write easements that are a lot less vague and just a lot more straightforward with respect to what's allowed on the easement versus what the conservation purposes of the easement are, which are also not really up to par with in this easement with what we commonly deal with currently.
Agreed.
So we're left having to interpret this, and maybe reasonable people can disagree on that, and so be it. But
well, again, I think this is clear. Basically, what it's saying is that in addition to what's existing on the property as of the date of the easement, there can be one single family dwelling not to exceed 7,000 square feet of above ground livable space, blah, 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 blah. So, regardless of the intent, which we, that 2007 was a long time ago. I think the way this reads pretty clearly is that unless the structure improvements are either on the property as of the date of this easement or authorized as follows.
Okay.
The question of interpretation really has been clarified considerably by recent legislative action in the Commonwealth, which indicates that in the presence of ambiguity, the interpretation that must prevail is the most conservative, that is the most protective. So even though there may be ambiguity, although I don't read it here, the view of outside bodies that affect us is very clear.
All right, so where do we go from here?
A motion to adjourn?
I feel like, Mr. Manning, I know that we didn't provide concrete numbers, but do you have a sense of our sentiments?
Yes, I apologize. I'm on board a flight right now, but I think that the committee is provided
Brian, you're not coming through very well.
I can't hear. I can't understand any of that.
You were choppy.
Yeah, I think he may have had to board his flight. So, yeah.
I apologize. Can you all hear me now, or is it still?
Yes.
Is it still
Much better.
Much better.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm actually waiting to board a flight. I might be the last person on, but this is very important to me, so I want to make sure I'm giving you all as much time as I possibly can. You've given us a good, if not a perfect rubric, but at least a rough outline of what the expectations and some of the hopes are. And we will go back and rethink some of our proposals and see what we can come back with.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Blaine, thank you also.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Do we have any new business? That's good. We do, Richie?
I do. I have a quick matter, and it's more administrative.
Okay.
But Lachlan Lee, who is he's our risk manager for the county, and he also spearheads the application and obtaining of liability insurance for the authority. He has a question. We've applied for the same insurance coverage that we've obtained in the past. At this point in time, though, we have $500,000 in cyber coverage, and that's fairly standard. I discussed with him that I did not think this board was exposed significantly to any type of cyber liability, but he wanted me to ask the board if they are interested in increasing the coverage from $500,000 to $1 million.
Member sentiments? Anyone?
What would the cost be?
Well, it's one of those things, the county covers it. So it wouldn't be a cost to the authority, it would be a cost to the county. But if what I would say is if the board is interested in exploring that, I can ask him for a quote. I don't think it'll be, if I recall correctly, it was around $1,000 a year additional to bump it up from 500,000 to 1 million.
I guess I don't have a good sense of why it's necessary.
Neither do I.
And it's our discussion as to, I mean, that's the 500,000 is standard. It comes with the policy.
Okay.
But beyond that, I in terms of our discussions, I explained it's just not, the board is not doing a whole lot of work online or computer work that would expose it to any form of liability that I would expect. So I advised him against it. But I am happy to ask for a quote and further information, maybe to get Lachlan to appear at the next meeting if the board is interested. But I did promise him I would bring that up.
Thank you. I'm inclined to trust your judgment and go with the standard. So it seems like we have very much exposure in that area. Any other thoughts?
Save some money, lower our taxes, Richie.
Yes,
We never lower. We never lower.
Come on, Richie.
Of course not.
Richie for governor.
I will let Mr. Lee know that the board is passing at this time.
I'll make a motion to adjourn if you'd like to have one.
I think Jay froze.
Yeah, he froze. But we still have
At
a
least he
quorum.
was smiling.
We still have a quorum. So I think Sherry made a motion to adjourn.
Right.
And it skipped old business. Was there any?
If there's no old business, I second the motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous.
Great. Thank you all for your time today.
Good evening.
Thank you.